If the penalty was $1 million and it was applied to the teams, I can tell you tomorrow all the teams would have it sorted and the drivers would never ever be in danger of swearing again. That's all it is. As I say, if you make it the teams, $1 million every time a driver swears, then it'll stop it completely. Do you try then to develop your own flexi wing, or do you put a lot of pressure on the FIA to get the regulations changed and fight it through the FIA? And obviously you keep a foot in both options, but actually trying to come up with your own flexi wing in a hurry, it's not easy.
If you're Max Verstappen, foursome say soon to be 5-time World Drivers' Champion, would you take that deal that Lawrence Stroll's offering him, $1 billion to sign now for the rest of your F1 career? Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour. With me as always, my friend and yours, the goatiest F1 mind to have ever goated, the one that they call Mr. Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well, Cam. You got to stop all that goat business. I'm definitely not. So there you go. Let's just settle that once and for all. But anyway, apart from that, I'm fine. Lovely day here in Spain. So yeah, just getting towards the spring now, aren't we? Almost, just about.
I think, Mr. Windsor, you error. So early on in the podcast, what we need to cut out is the latter, not the former. All of this talking about sunny Spain, it makes me feel sad since outside in the UK is so dreary. You know what I mean? But go on.
Spain's a great country. It's a great country these days. I mean, in so many ways. And yeah, I've just got back from the Monte Carlo rally, drove up there from Spain, easy drive, and had lots of fun in the mountains and hung out with the boys. And it was just great, you know, and we're going to do some more of that. Just great. Wonderful to see some very skillful driving on display, I must say.
So, Mr. Windsor, I'm not jealous at all, not in the slightest. Let's talk about some F1-age, because there's a couple of things that have happened. First topic on the docket, Johnny Herbert terminated as far as his services with the FIA as a steward. Many F1 aficionados are saying it was in no small part due to some of the comments that he'd made on Max Verstappen's very unique style of driving, aggressive wheel-to-wheel pugilism. What do you make of that, Peter? Were they right to terminate Johnny Herbert as a steward?
I don't know. There's so many areas to that, aren't there? I think one, the drivers having the principle of having a driver as one of the stewards is a good one. But you got to be quite selective in who you go for, quite obviously. B, I think they need to be paid a bit more than they're getting. I mean, because the reason it is all a bit scratchy is because, as far as I know, they just basically get expenses paid, quite nice expenses. But it's, you know, most of these guys are pretty high earners, and in theory, their time is quite valuable. So if you want to have them doing something properly in a very professional way, you got to pay them. And in my opinion, and if Johnny is out there doing other stuff, whether it be, I don't know, TV or punditry for betting companies or whatever it is, then, you know, he can't mix that, I don't think, with being a steward. That's pretty clear. And I'm surprised the FIA don't make that one of the requirements the minute they engage a driver anyway to play a stewardship role. Because, you know, you've got to be down the middle. You've got to be objective, and you've got to be very au fait with the rule book. I'm not saying Johnny isn't au fait with the rule book, but, you know, you can't be sort of out there expressing opinions about a current driver and then expect to be taken seriously as an FIA steward. That's pretty logical to me. But again, you have to blame the FIA in a way for not making that pretty clear from day one and paying them a bit more.
I don't disagree, Mr. Windsor. It's a very contentious issue, this, as far as the stewards and full-time and whether they can be pundits. But I agree with you. You can't wear two caps as an adjudicator, right? You've either got to be umpire or pundit. You can't be both at the same time. I think, like you said, objective stewardship is mutually exclusive, a completely different entity from punditry. And I think he's made his tenure now becomes untenable by dint of the fact that he's talked so often and frequently and been getting paid for it. Let me ask you something else, Mr.
Well,
Windsor.
just let me finish that by saying, I
Hmm.
mean, I imagine Johnny saying, "Oh, thank goodness for that. I don't do any more of that FIA steward stuff." I don't know why these drivers do it. Actually, I can't think of anything more. Well, let me rephrase it. If I was Johnny Herbert, I would have been in Jamaica for the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, having fun with the family or whatever. You know, why would he need to be doing any of this stuff anyway? It's so demeaning, really, I think. And the same goes for all these ex-F1 drivers doing TV and stuff. Why don't they go and do some other things, run the country, take on President Trump or whatever, do something responsible. Anyway,
Yeah, don't disagree. Go on, let's talk about expletive stuff, because the FIA have also in the past couple of weeks revised their rules, saying that they're gonna clamp down on drivers that are using colourful language. The fines now on the third attempt, potentially drivers could get a one race ban, which could in turn, Peter, affect the championship. What do you make of an F1 championship potentially being settled by a cheeky expletive or two?
Oh, I think it's a good thing. I'm slightly revising what I said about this 3 or 4 months ago, because I do think it is very wrong to allow for Formula One to allow swearing in public. But having said all of that, you need to be. I think there are a lot of layers to this as well. And one is there's a time and a place for correct language, and there's also potentially times and places where you can be a bit more loose with your language. And I hope the FIA take that into account as well, because it's one thing to swear and use an expletive on live TV, on a radio transmission. It's another thing to do it on a one-on-one interview with a journalist 3 days after the race, and the journalist then puts that out on the internet to the world. I mean, are they differentiating between those two things? I hope they are, because they're different things, aren't they? Yeah. So that's the first point. And as ever, that involves a lot of gray areas of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. But on the basis that it would be better if none of these drivers swore, on the basis, again, that there might be an impressionable young child listening and it's the wrong thing for Formula One to be doing, then I think in principle, it's the right way to go. Now, this is where, and I have to say, I think the president is doing the right thing in being quite tough about this, the FIA president. But I think the way it's been executed and is being executed is completely wrong, because as I've said before, the problem is not the drivers. The problem are the people behind the drivers. They're the media squads of these Formula One teams, who apparently do very, very little apart from say no to everything as much as they can. And I'm not being vindictive here. I'm just saying, what are these bands of, 15, 20 people who work in the media department of any given Formula One team? What do they actually do? The one thing that should be at the top of their priority list when they're saying, no, the driver's not available for this, he can do that, the sponsorship requirements enables him to do this, 5 of us have to walk with him to this place in the Paddock Club so he can do this on time, blah, blah, blah. The one thing that's more important than that is getting the driver to say the right thing at the right time. And generally speaking, for the sponsors, when it involves money, they're right on the knuckle, and they do that. And the drivers are very good, and they're well taught on what to say and what not to say and how to answer difficult questions in the Paddock Club, for example, or maybe even in an FIA press conference. But it appears that at no stage do these media teams of any of the Grand Prix teams actually sit the driver down and say, look, swearing is a big issue now, and you need to be very careful when you open your mouth and say what you want, and when you have to think about it. An FIA press conference is obviously not a place to be swearing. Live radio during the race, practice or qualifying, is obviously not a place to be swearing. But if we're doing something in closed doors with a few chosen journalists that we can control, yeah, then you can be a little bit more free and easy. Now, it's not very difficult. I've taken about 5 minutes to explain that. I reckon that's about how long it would take to tell a Grand Prix driver the same thing. But do they do that? Do they actually take the trouble to try and help the drivers understand when it's appropriate? And I say help the drivers because we cannot assume that they're normal human beings. They're not. They're Grand Prix drivers. All they've done all their lives is trained to be a Formula One driver. They haven't learnt elocution, probably. They haven't learnt when to swear and when not to swear. They just get on and race. And that's why this is out of control, because the teams are not doing it. And I think the team should be financed, should be penalized, or points should be deducted or something like that from the Constructors' Championship, not from the drivers, because it's not the fault of the drivers. I know they're the mouthpieces. I know they're the guys that open their mouths, and you might say, oh, well, they're all over 21. But these guys are all over 21 do something that we can't do, that we mortals can't do. And the reason we can't do what they do is because they've spent all their lives honing an unbelievable talent that we could only dream about having in the first place. So they're rarefied atmosphere. The teams are behind the drivers. They're the ones that are constantly saying, do this, do that, don't do this, you're not available to do that. They're the people that should be educating the drivers, and they're the people that should be taking the penalty if the driver does swear, because the team then hasn't done its job of educating the driver correctly.
Very well said, Mr. Windsor. I would see that, though, and I'd raise you two things. Do you think that I think it's something like 140,000 euros for a third offence and the one race ban. Do you think that the penalty is commensurate for the crime of dropping a cheeky F-bomb or whichever expletive you want?
Well, I'll tell you this, if the penalty was $1 million and it was applied to the teams, I can tell you tomorrow, all the teams would have it sorted and the drivers would never, ever be in danger of swearing again. That's all it is. As I say, if you make it the teams, $1 million every time a driver swears, then it'll stop it completely.
True.
So, end of story.
Yeah.
I don't know why there's any even discussion about it. Very simple.
I think the reason, Mr. Windsor, why there is discussion about it is because for the longest time, I think F1 fans, I remember back in the day at secondary school when F1 was almost like it was a dirty secret. The language of F1 wasn't something that very many people understood. Income, COVID, and F1 in 2021, Lewis versus Max, and so too Drive to Survive and the phenomenon that was Netflix's docu-series. And in there, Mr. Windsor, there is a lot of dirty language. It's Gunther Steiner and it's Danny Rick. And I think part of its brilliance, there are foibles that we can discuss and pull threads at, but part of its brilliance is that it gave us, as far as F1, what you've been advocating for, like a proper open door, peel back the fourth wall and let the F1 community, the spending F1 community, the ones who are buying the merch and spending thousands of pounds on paddock passes, etc., let us see what the drivers are, warts and all, rather than this well-packaged PR spectacle. We want to hear them as they are and see Lewis in the, I don't know, steward's room, or see Max Verstappen having a word with Christian Horner and Adrian Newey. And Drive to Survive gave us that. So, long way of saying this. Do those penalties not close the fourth wall, put another unnecessary barrier between the sport and the personalities that drive, no pun intended, F1 and the paying F1 community? Is it a bad thing in that sense, do you think, this swearing stuff?
Well, I would say if the Netflix documentary is responsible for people wanting to hear the drivers swear, then it's not a very good thing. And I think the documentary's been bad for Formula One, because I don't think it's a good thing. And if a driver, if a tennis player swears in the middle of a match, he will get penalized and fined. And I think that's correct, because you cannot say the audience is just, 19-year-old Netflix people. There will be 7, 8-year-old children there as well. That's what Formula One wants anyway. So you have to have a broad brush view of the audience in front of which you're putting on your show. And just because it was on that behind the scenes series, it doesn't justify it at all, in my opinion. And you could argue, using the Peter Windsor model of we should have had much more and we should still have much more behind the scenes stuff. What we should be filming are these media departments of the teams trying to tell the drivers not to swear. That would be even better than hearing the driver swear. That is the point. And if there's a driver out there that says, don't tell me what to do, I'm going to do whatever I want and I'm going to say whatever I want, and he's saying that to his team, to his media team, head of marketing, whatever they want to call themselves, you could say that's good television, but then at least we know what's going on. And that's what I'm getting at. I think there's no point in doing a make-believe behind-the-scenes TV series that's brought to life because lots of people use the F word. It's pathetic. What we need is real behind-the-scenes television. And we need proper editing where if somebody is swearing, you bleep it out. I'm sorry. That's the way I think. And I think the teams are the people that should be enforcing that and making that happen. Because it's all very well to say Liberty, Formula One, it's the biggest sport in the world, Wall Street, stakeholders, but you can't do that just dragging Formula One through swear words in front of young families. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. You don't do that in the Paddock Club. So why do they do it on live television? It's a very good question, I think. And I say that because I spent a lot of time in the Paddock Club in the last few years. And no Formula One driver, when he comes in, seeing all those guys with their expensive watches and their nice suits, all the people that he's waving to and signing autographs for in the Paddock Club, but they're all paying probably $5,000 a ticket or whatever. They never swear. Interesting, eh?
Very interesting, Mr. Windsor. Segues very nicely onto talk about Aston Martin and this $1 billion contract that rumour dictates they're prepared to offer Maximilian Verstappen between now and the rest of his F1 career. Let me pitch the question at you this way, Mr. Windsor. If you're Max Verstappen, for some say soon to be 5-time World Drivers' Champion, would you take that deal that Lawrence Stroll's offering him, $1 billion to sign now for the rest of your F1 career?
I wouldn't, no, because I've enjoyed my racing and I know what I need around me to go well and to drive well. And I like the atmosphere that I create around myself. And I wouldn't want to go to a team where, quite obviously, it's a very difficult, stressful atmosphere, as per a lot of the people who have been there and then left. So, no, I wouldn't.
Oof.
I think I'd like to think that Max is mature enough now and he's got enough money enough to say, it's not about money. It's about enjoying my life and getting on with my racing. And that's when I drive at my best. And I'm not driving just for the money. And I think, and I like to think that Max would think if that guy wants to pay me that much money, then there's something wrong, if he needs to do that.
Isn't it? It's a good shout, Mr. Windsor, but isn't it more pull factors or push factors as versus pull? The thing that made Red Bull for Max Verstappen a family-oriented business, harmony, Adrian Newey, Jonathan Wheatley, a car capable of winning races and therefore championships that was dependable, stable at the rear, nice and front-endy, all the handling dynamics that Max Verstappen has leveraged to such great success, that all those factors are now faded to black. Now, Peter, Jonathan.
Well, they may be, they may not be, but that's a different question. If Adrian Newey was saying to Max, look, Max, I'm going to be in this, I love it here. I'm going to be in it for the next 10 years. I can tell you now, we're going to win a lot of races. If you want to join us, we're going to win a lot of races, a lot of championships. Let's go. If I was Max, I'd probably do it. But the first question was about would I do it for the $1 billion to work for Lawrence Stroll? Two different things. And also, don't forget, if you took the first one, the $1 billion and the Lawrence Stroll, there's no guarantee Adrian's going to be there for the next decade.
It's a good shout.
Getting any younger.
Yeah.
So, I would, and taking the option 2, which is Adrian ringing me up and going out for dinner in the local pizza joint, I would say, yeah, okay, let's do it. I love racing with you, Adrian. A couple of years, let's go. You're not going to be in it for too much longer, I know. And he'd do it for that reason. Yeah, exactly right. He'd do it for the Jonathan Wheatley, Adrian Newey reason, not the Jonathan's there, of course. Not for the money. That's the point I'm making. Because I think Max is bright enough and been around long enough to know that that's the way to do it, to go motor racing, is with the right people. That's distinct from huge, ridiculous sums of money, which inevitably always end in tears.
Oh, Mr. Windsor, dropping the gospel as per usual.
Well, not really. I'm just... as you know, I don't believe big is better. I don't think money improves things. And I don't think that looking after the stakeholders is the number one priority in Formula One. I've said that a million times. So, I'm always going to say the same thing, aren't I?
Fair cop on all counts, methinks. Let me ask you about Lewis Hamilton again. Second week last week in the red car with the yellow badge and the black prancing course atop. What did you make about that? Because again, split the community. Some people said, well, he's crashed again, sector 3. This is Lewis Hamilton's mistakes that he made almost ad infinitum last year, crashing on a hot lap, sector 3. This doesn't bode well. Some say that that's Lewis Hamilton, that he's comfortable with the car and that he's already at one with it, so comfortable, able to push during sector 3. On which side of that fence do you sit, Peter?
Well, yeah, you're giving me two options there. I don't actually agree with either of those because I don't think he was comfortable with the car. That 23 car is a dog. So I don't think anybody can be comfortable in that car. What I do think is he felt the car's a lot better than any Mercedes he's driven for the last few years. And so he was giving it some and going for it and starting to relax and realize that he had made absolutely the right decision. The team felt great. The car felt a billion times better than a Merc's ever felt since 2021. And yeah, he made a mistake on the last corner. I think it was sector 3. It was the last corner where a lot of people have had errors, made errors in the last couple of years since they've made that a quick corner. And yeah, he made a mistake there and lost it. But as I said in the video I did yesterday, to me, that's a good sign because that's Lewis being a race driver again. I think if it was in a Merc and it felt still dodgy, he probably would have been leaving a bit more margin. But in a Ferrari, he's feeling right. Go for it now. We haven't got a lot of time to mess around, and the season's going to be upon us before we even blink. So let's get on with it. And he made a mistake. Yeah, good. Racing drivers do, don't they? Max mistakes. They all make mistakes. So I don't read into it any more than that. Well, what I do read into it is I think it's a very, very good sign for Lewis and anyone who supports Lewis.
Peter, what do you make of the marketing furore? The picture that he took on Instagram with the black overcoat and black pinstripe with the Ferrari F40 behind him. Is there anything that you would have done to improve that marketing virality? Change the car, different suit, different shoes?
Well, I like to think that wasn't a marketing thing. That was Lewis turning up wearing the clothes he felt were appropriate for his first day at Maranello. And I think it was pretty cool that he did that. I think we're all, because everybody's so thirsty for news and what they're going to put on their website, everybody makes much more of everything than it is. And all it is Lewis, what am I going to wear today? Oh yeah, I got to put on the old mafia suit and see how we get on. Have a laugh. And he looked great in it, I thought. Wonderful. I mean, I've never been an F40 fan. But having said that, I mean, it looked a little bit sort of retro and kind of cool, didn't it? So I wasn't really upset about that. But if he had something like a 330 P4 there, or a Dino Formula 2 Ferrari, or a 66 Lorenzo Bandini Dino 1,000-kilometer car, yeah, then I possibly would have been even more impressed. But I think the whole thing was really well done and beautiful. Yeah, it's really cool. As I said, give me a job as a bottle washer, garage floor sweeper. I want to be there. I want to be there for this time with Lewis and Charles and Ferrari and everything that's going on. And Lewis will do his own thing, won't he, in terms of how he interprets Italian Ferrari style, if that's the right word, with his clothing and the way he looks. He'll look different every race, probably. And that's good. We'll look forward to that.
I think it was a seminal moment in F1 history. That Instagram picture of him in front of the F40 was liked by 5 million people, Peter. That's the most liked picture ever as far as F1 circumstance on Instagram. I feel like Lewis is a rising tide and he'll float all F1 boats. And I think...
Yeah, but I think we need to see that in the context of motor racing in general, though, because we measure everything by modern stats, don't we? In Instagram, the record number of likes. But had Instagram existed in 1938, how many likes would that picture of Tazio Nuvolari walking from his auto union into the paddock area at Donington, wearing the yellow shirt with the Tazio Nuvolari logo, and the little boy down there with the box camera trying to take a picture of him and waving to the crowd? How many likes would that have got on Instagram in 1938?
A couple.
So, yeah, exactly. So my point is, all these stats are irrelevant because we're only gauging them on modern stuff, and we shouldn't do that.
Yeah, you can't. Sadly.
Equally, Jim Clark and Dan Gurney sitting next to one another after the '64 Belgian Grand Prix when they both run out of fuel, except one of them's done it after the checkered flag and one of them's done it before, and neither knew who had won. And then they hear on the PA that Jimmy's the winner, and they both burst out laughing. And Michael T Senior got that picture. How many would that have got on Instagram?
Yeah, more than a few. I don't doubt it. I think you're quite right, Peter, in your assertion that you're not. We can't compare apples with apples. Sadly, well, happily.
No, but I take your point. But it was a great picture. It was a picture well taken. Lewis looking super cool, and Maranello said it all. As I've been saying from day one, Lewis is going to absolutely love every millisecond of his time at Ferrari, whether it's the food, the fashion, the cars, the tifosi, Fiorano, the hotels, whatever it is, he's going to love it.
I can't wait, Peter. It feels like that we're going to see a seminal season.
Well, I think we are, and I think, I mean, the point of that Barcelona test and the shunt was that this isn't now the Lewis that we saw, in trouble in the Brazilian Grand Prix last year. This is the Lewis Hamilton who's pretty fired up now, to the point where he's on the limit in a very dodgy car going through the quick right-hander at Barcelona and having a shunt, and he's totally fired up, integrated into the team already. Freddie Vasseur doing a brilliant job as predicted.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing now is not so much how Lewis is going to go; it's what Charles' reaction is going to be. As I said in the bit I did yesterday, how Charles' reaction is going to be if Lewis does get a break or two in the first few races.
And what do you make of that, Peter? That all noises are saying that Ferrari will make a decision, that they don't want to do what McLaren did last year and seize defeat from the jaws of victory at the altar of failing to establish a very clear driver hierarchy, that they'll make a decision circa Monaco as to which one of those drivers they'll prefer. Is that the right decision, do you think?
I think it's absolute nonsense. I don't think they're going to do that. And if anybody's saying they are, or even if Ferrari is saying they are, they're just misleading people. It's complete nonsense. They wouldn't do it at Monaco. No chance.
Wow.
And what does it mean anyway? Does it mean that, let's say Lewis wins the first four Grand Prix, they get to Monaco and they have an official announcement saying, from here on in, Lewis is our number one driver. Does that mean that if Charles is just about to win the British Grand Prix and Lewis is second and Lando's third, that Charles is going to slow down on the last lap at the British Grand Prix and let Lewis Hamilton win? I don't think that would happen. So no, I think that's complete nonsense.
Oof. Go on then, Mr.
Last couple of races, maybe. Yeah. Last couple of races, but not Monaco. No way.
Yeah, that's probably a bit too soon. Go on, let me ask you, as we round third base, Mr. Windsor, let me ask you about flexi wing gates, because the FIA are clamping down now. They said last year that if it passes the load test, then winner, chicken dinner, crack on, chaps. To which Red Bull said, well, hang on, it looks like McLaren are flexing. We don't have financial resources to throw at flexi wing, and they're going to go and win the constructors and potentially the drivers. How is that fair? Now the FIA have changed their tone, right? They said last year passes the load test, crack on. Now they're saying they're amending the load test. The outbound portion of the front wing, the flex margin of error on there previously was 15 millimeters, now it's 13. Inboard portion of the front wing was 5 millimeters, now it's 3. Is that fair, Peter, when these guys have spent most of the off-season trying to develop flexi wings to the tolerance of 2024? Now they've got to adjust they're instituting this rule as at Spanish Grand Prix this year. Have they messed up the timing and not?
No, I don't think so. I think most of the teams were on stream with that. Because as I said in the vid yesterday, when you are a Red Bull or a Ferrari or a Mercedes and you know what's going on, you actually, mid-season 24, you have a choice. Do you try then to develop your own flexi wing, or do you put a lot of pressure on the FIA to get the regulations changed and fight it through the FIA? And obviously you keep a foot in both options, but actually trying to come up with your own flexi wing in a hurry is not easy, particularly front wing, I would have thought. And so, and Red Bull would have said, oh, well, we don't have the budget for it. I mean, they do have the budget for it. It's just they don't want to spend it. And the problem with that is that if they did really want to do a McLaren beating flexi wing mid-season, they would, go through their entire budget probably. So they could have done it, but it's much easier for them to say we can't do it, and therefore we're going to put pressure on the FIA, which is now what's happened. And I think Ferrari and Mercedes kind of knew that was going on as well, and they let Red Bull take the lead on that. And yeah, you'd never assume anything with the FIA. So you would always have a door open to building flexi wings around the 24 regs, but you would also be very aware of what the FIA were looking at for 25. And none of this would be a surprise or a shock, in my opinion. So I think they'll all be pretty much on a par by the time they start in Melbourne.
It's going to be incredible, Mr. Windsor. Finally, can I get a prediction from you? Drivers and Constructors Championship. I know you don't like to do this normally, Mr. Windsor, and we'll continue talking between now and then.
Well, it's a bit early, isn't it, to ask me to do that? They haven't even started testing. So
bit.
I don't know. I think I think Charles could win the championship.
Oof.
I'm not going to state the obvious, which is a McLaren driver or possibly Max. I think Charles could. I've got a good feeling about Ferrari. And what I really like about Ferrari is that they didn't just spend the 1 billion that Lawrence Stroll is now offering Max. They didn't spend the 1 billion to get Adrian Newey, and they realized that they've actually got a pretty good team that they can get the best from. And I love that type of organic growth and confidence building that gives you, and full marks to Frederick Vasseur for that.
Yeah.
So I've got a good feeling about him, and I, it only depends on how Charles is managed, I guess, how he manages his own emotions, and whether or not, if Lewis does get a bit of a run on him early on for whatever reason, whether he can stay calm and let it happen for him in the same way. And I think he's been around long enough to be able to do that. Of course, Lewis is a different animal to anyone else he's ever raced with, so that's an important point to remember. So if I had to go out on a limb, I'd say, if you wanted, decent odds, I'd say Charles probably.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But
the fact that it's difficult is great, isn't it? Because we got these 4 or 5 teams, and they're all going to be able to win races this year, I think, in 25. So if that's the case, you could argue that they're all going to be potentially able to win a championship. I mean, there's no way you could rule George Russell out either, I don't think. And you certainly obviously can't rule out Max or one of the 2 McLaren drivers, but I do think Lando's biggest problem is going to be Oscar Piastri. It's not going to be Charles or Lewis or Max.
Yeah.
And how that gets solved, or it won't get solved, because McLaren have shown that they're incapable of solving that problem. Short of replacing Piastri with Daniel Ricciardo again.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. So,
Oh, I cannot wait for one.
I mean, it's a good point. I mean, I should make that. If McLaren announced tomorrow that Oscar Piastri was, I don't know, doing a year of sabbatical, and the number 2 this year, in order to try to help him win the championship, is Daniel Ricciardo, all effort in Lando Norris, then I think you'd have to say Lando's got a really, really good chance of winning the championship.
Yeah.
Conversely, if they said Lando's taking a sabbatical and Oscar's our number 1 driver with Daniel Ricciardo in the other car, the 2 Aussies, and he's out there to help Oscar as much as possible, I'd say Oscar's got a really good chance of winning the championship. But as I've been saying for, ad nauseum, Oscar and Lando together is a very, very difficult combination to work with. Not because they don't get on, but because they're so good, both of them.
Yeah. Senna and Prost 1989, reminiscent of maybe, Peter? We'll see. It's going to be...
different thing, isn't it? Senna, Prost had won championships at McLaren when Senna joined, and then Senna arrived. Basically, his muscle was that he'd brought Honda engines with him, and so the whole dynamic was just out the window from day one. There's a different thing, really. And anyway, Prost had been racing with Niki Lauda, so it wasn't as if he'd had a Daniel Ricciardo in the other car and suddenly had Ayrton Senna. He'd already had somebody super quick. So I don't think it was the same situation at all, really.
Agreed. Oh, Peter, I can't wait. The first...
Can I say one other thing, Cameron? A friend of mine in Australia got onto some chat thing on the internet with Oscar Piastri. I don't know how it happened, but Oscar Piastri got involved and they started chatting. And because he was an Aussie and he was asking intelligent questions and they had something in common, they got online quite well. And this went on for 2 or 3 months, and there was chat about this, chat about that. And then in the end, Oscar said, when you come to England, love to take you around the McLaren factory, do this, do that. And then I don't know what excuse it was, but it was something like, just pay some of the expenses and I'll get the rest of it, send the money here. And as soon as that happened, my mate smelled a rat. And sure enough, the whole thing was AI. It was AI use of the voice. The whole thing was fraud. And I say that because there's going to be so much more of that going on in the world, I think, certainly in our Formula One world too. So everybody be very careful of engaging on the internet now with so-called Formula One personalities, because AI is opening the doors to all sorts of drama. I did bring this to the attention of McLaren, and interestingly, got no reply from them whatsoever, no response.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they're too busy educating their drivers on how not to swear.
Oh, Mr. Windsor, you're an absolute legend, sir. Too good as always. If you enjoy Mr. Peter D. Windsor's market-leading insight, the goatiest to have ever goated, check him out on the YouTube. Peter Windsor is the channel. And then on podcasting platforms, you can see and, listen to Mr. Peter D. Windsor. The Short Corners podcast, as always. Peter, you're a legend. I enjoy these conversations so much, genuinely, and learn so much each and every single time. Peddlers, if you're watching, share, like, comment, subscribe. Between now and next time, as always, remember to look but never stare.